Alright, so let's do some polynomial stuff. Let's look at this one first. I've got two factors, 2x plus 3 and x minus 1, which are factors of this funky polynomial here. And it's asking me to find a and b and all the zeros of the polynomial. Alright, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that 2x plus 3 and x minus 1 are roots. That means they multiply together, factors, I guess, so that I get that 2x to the fourth plus ax cubed minus 3x squared plus bx plus 3. All right, now I can go ahead and expand that if I want, but notice that I've got two linear factors here, okay, and I totally copied that down wrong. That should be a 4. And how many factors should there be for a quartic function? Well, there should be 4 factors, which means I'm missing 2 linear factors. Now, they could be real, they could be complex, we don't know at this point, but when I put them together, I am going to end up with a quadratic. Okay, so right now that's all I got. So let's go ahead and write this out. Let's go ahead and expand this. We'll have 2x squared, 2x times x is x squared. 3 times x is plus 3x, negative 1 times 2x is minus 2x. 3x minus 2x gives me a plus an x, and then 3 times negative 1 is minus 3. Now, my quadratic there is going to have 3 coefficients, right? So I've already got an a and a b there, but let's just go cx squared plus dx plus, and I don't really want to use e because that's a numerical constant, so we'll go f equals this stuff. Okay, now here I'm going to see if I can do a little bit of reasoning to figure out what some of these other numbers are. All right, you'll notice that the leading coefficient is 2x to the fourth. Well, that comes from when I distribute this, the 2x squared times the cx squared. That means I actually know what c is. C has to be 1 because 2x squared times this has to give me 2x to the fourth, and the only way it's going to stay 2 is if c is 1. And so I now know that c is 1. That's pretty snazzy. And then I look over here and I look at the last one, the plus 3. Everything else is going to have an x in it. The only thing that's not going to have an x is when I do negative 3 times f. And the only way negative 3 times f is going to give me positive 3 is if f equals negative 1. So I'm actually a good part of the way there already, right? So let's just rewrite this. So I'm going to have 2x squared plus x minus 3. And then I've got c, which is 1. So x squared plus dx minus 1 equals that whole thing. And I'm going to go ahead and write it out again because at this point I'm going to start trying to put some pieces together other than what we've already got. Okay, so at this point I'm going to look at each of the coefficients, okay, which is essentially what I was doing before. I was just looking at how do I get the 2x to the fourth, how do I get the 3? Well, now let's look at the other ones. How do I get this ax cubed? Well, the ax cubed is going to have to come from a squared times an x. So for example, 2x squared times dx will give me an x cubed. Right? And the other way I can get x cubed, because that was this one right here, I could also do x squared times x. So plus x squared times x. Both of those are going to give me x cubes. That's the only way, only combination of all of these that will give me x cubed. So these together have to give me ax cubed. Okay, let's see if we can do a similar thing now for the bx. How do I get x? Well, I get x by taking something with x and multiplying by a constant. So x times negative 1. So negative 1x. And then also the negative 3 times the dx. So minus 3 dx. And those are the only 2 ways I can get an x. And so those have to equal bx. Okay? Now, that having been done, I now have 2dx cubed plus x cubed equals ax cubed. And some of this, you may be able to skip part of this. All right? I'm just writing it out formally so that you can see it. And then negative 1x minus 3 dx equals bx. So I'm going to go ahead and factor out the x. So x and then negative 1 minus 3d equals bx. And same thing over here with this other one is I'm going to factor out the x cubed, which will leave me with 2d plus 1 equals ax cubed. Well, I've got now an x on both sides. Right? I got the x cubed here and the x cubed here, which means that a has to equal 2d plus 1. Over here, I can take the x's, and I get that b equals negative 1 minus 3d. Okay? So now I've got a little bit closer. I've got that a is 2d plus 1, and I've got that b is negative 1 minus 3d. All right? So the next question is, where do I go from here? Well, if I consider my formula here, right, I've looked at the x to the fourth. That gave me this number right here. I looked at the 3. That gave me the f right here. And now I've looked at the a and the b as well. The only thing I haven't looked at yet is this central piece right here, the negative 3x squared. So, well, okay, let's do it. Negative 3x squared. Can we compare that to what we have and see how I get the x squared? Well, there's a couple of ways to get x squared. I can have 2x squared times negative 1. So that would be negative 2x squared. I could have x times dx. So that would be plus dx squared. I could also have negative 3 times x squared. All right, and if I do that, I got negative 3x squared equals negative 2 plus d minus 3x squared. You could add the 3x squared there as well. I mean, that would be pretty easy. But notice that I got the x squareds on both sides. Okay, that means that negative 3 needs to equal, I guess I don't need the parentheses anymore, negative 2 plus d minus 3. Add the 3, add the 2. I got that 2 equals d. And what good did that do me? Well, I now have d, which means I can now find the other two. So a is equal to 2 times 2, which is 4, plus 1, which is 5. I now have a. Woohoo! And I can also do b, because b is equal to negative 1 minus 3 times d. If d is 2, that would be negative 6. Negative 1 minus 6 is negative 7. Woohoo! And so now I've got the whole thing, right? So I have the whole formula. I found a and b. Check, check. And then the last thing is it asks me to find the zeros of the polynomial. Well, I already got the zeros of this first part, right? So I know that zeros are when x equals negative 3 over 2, right? Because if this is equal to 0, then I subtract a 3 and divide by 2. If this is equal to 0, then x is 1. And so I just need to find the other 2 because there should be 4. And so I'm going to take that. I'm going to go x squared plus d, but I know that d is 2x minus 1. And if that would factor, that would be really nice. But of course, naturally, that's not going to be the case. So what do we do? I don't know. Let's complete the square. Or quadratic formula, but I'm going to complete the square. So I'm going to move the 1 over. So I've got a equals 1 on this side. I'll add 1, which then factors to x plus 1 squared equals 2. Square root both sides. X plus 1 equals the square root of 2. Of course, positive or negative. And then x equals negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 2, which are my other 2 roots, which then go here. So it turns out they're all real, though a couple of them are not very nice. All right, so there's that problem, and I hope that's helpful to you.